Juventus have just told Arsenal no, not a soft no, not a we will think about it. A flat rejection, delivered with a message attached, that Kenan Yildiz is considered untouchable at the Allianz Stadium. Arsenal made an inquiry back in June, and they renewed that interest more recently, testing the waters again as the clock ticks down toward the end of the transfer window. The answer has not changed. Juventus want to build their future around this 21-year-old, and the number being floated around him, €100 million, is not enough to shift that stance. That is the reality Arsenal are working with right now, and it tells you something important before we go any further. This is not a summer where money alone opens doors. This is a summer where certain clubs have decided their best young players are simply not for sale, no matter who comes calling. And that single rejection is only the surface of a much bigger story unfolding around Arsenal right now. There are conversations happening about wingers, about strikers, about defenders who might leave, players who might be loaned out, and a striker at another club who is refusing to train properly because he wants out. All of it is moving at once, and all of it needs to be understood clearly, without noise, without exaggeration, just the facts and what they actually mean for this Arsenal squad. Here is what is genuinely at risk. The transfer window closes at 11 o'clock at night on Tuesday, September the 1st. Arsenal have already lost out on one of the most talked about targets of the entire summer. Their business so far has been modest, a handful of additions, nothing that fundamentally reshapes the attacking line the way many inside the club hoped it would. If the next few weeks do not bring in the right faces, and if the players who need to leave do not leave, Arsenal could enter the new season with a squad that looks unfinished in exactly the areas that decide titles. A team defending a Premier League crown and chasing a Champions League cannot afford gaps up front. And right now there are real questions about who leads the line, who provides proven quality out wide, and who covers on the right side of defence. Every conversation we are about to walk through connects back to that central tension, time running out, and a squad still being shaped. Before we go further, if you want this kind of clear-headed breakdown of every Arsenal story as it develops, this channel is where you get it. Hit that subscribe button now so you do not miss the next update, because this window still has real twists left in it. Let us go through this properly, one piece at a time, starting with what is circulating right now across the football world, and then moving into the bigger picture stories that explain why all of it matters. First, Juventus have rejected Arsenal's interest in Kenan Yildiz and consider the attacker untouchable. Arsenal renewed their interest after making an inquiry in June, but Juventus have no intention of selling the 21-year-old. The Serie A giants want to build their future around Yildiz, meaning even a €100 million offer is unlikely to change their stance. My read on this one is simple. When a selling club uses the word untouchable, they are not negotiating, they are closing a door. Yildiz is exactly the profile of player Juventus have decided to build around, rather than cash in on, and a fee north of €100 million still not moving them, tells you their valuation of him is not really financial at all. It is about identity and future planning. For Arsenal, this means crossing him off the list and redirecting energy elsewhere, because chasing a player who has been explicitly labelled untouchable wastes time this club does not have. Second, Arsenal are showing interest in Chelsea winger Pedro Neto as Mikel Arteta looks to strengthen his attack. Chelsea are willing to consider a sale for the Portugal international, while Neto is open to assessing interest this summer. Manchester City, Tottenham and Liverpool are also interested, although Chelsea are not actively pushing Neto towards an exit. This is a genuinely different situation to Yildiz, and that difference matters. Here you have a selling club willing to talk and a player willing to listen. That is the definition of a deal that can actually happen before deadline day. The presence of Manchester City, Tottenham and Liverpool in the conversation tells me Arsenal cannot afford to sit back and wait. Competition for Neto is real, and hesitation could easily hand this one to a rival. Chelsea not actively pushing him out also matters. It means there is no fire sale panic on their side, so any deal will likely be on Chelsea's terms rather than a discount. Third, Arsenal could consider a younger right-back. Ben White has enjoyed a very strong pre-season, but may not be part of Arsenal's long-term plans. From a squad-building perspective, bringing in a younger right-back could make sense as Arsenal look to plan for the future while maintaining depth in the position. This one is worth sitting with for a moment because it is a little counterintuitive. White performing well in pre-season and still potentially being moved on suggests this is not about current form, it is about long-term planning. Clubs at Arsenal's level are increasingly thinking several years ahead rather than just about the next campaign, and if the sporting staff view White's ceiling as limited for the future, then a strong pre-season will not necessarily save his place in those plans. For viewers, the lesson here is that performance and long-term security are not always the same conversation at a club building for sustained success. Fourth, Gunners still want another attacking signing. Arsenal should strengthen the attack before the transfer window closes. However, if no new forward arrives, Eberechi Eze is seen as an intriguing internal option who could be given more responsibility on the left. This tells us Arsenal have a backup plan if the external market does not deliver, and that is smart planning rather than desperation. Eze already being at the club as a genuine option softens the pressure around missing out on someone like Vinicius Jr. or a marquee striker. It does not remove the need for reinforcements, but it does mean Arteta is not left completely exposed if deadline day comes and goes without a new attacking face walking through the door. Fifth, there has been an update on Gabriel Jesus and his situation in Italy. His agent, Giovanni Brancini, has explained that the trip to Italy was not specifically about Jesus, but about other matters entirely. For several months, multiple clubs have been sounding out the player's situation to understand Arsenal's intentions, numbers, and expectations. 3 Italian clubs approached the agent directly, and a potential 4th expressed interest at a point when they appeared close to selling an important striker of their own. Apart from 2 Turkish clubs, which were rejected because Jesus had no interest in a move to Turkey, there have been no other significant negotiations. On the specific question of a move to Napoli, the agent described it as something that could only be dreaming at this stage, under conditions that do not currently exist, and said it would be inappropriate to suggest otherwise, both for Napoli and for Jesus himself. This is one of the more nuanced updates in the entire window, and it deserves careful framing so nobody walks away with the wrong impression. There is no active negotiation with Napoli. There is interest, background sounding out, clubs testing the waters, but the agent himself has closed the door on describing this as anything concrete right now. What this tells me is that Jesus' situation is being monitored across Italy, multiple clubs like knowing where he stands, but nobody has actually pulled the trigger. For Arsenal, this is useful information rather than urgent news. It suggests a departure is plausible at some point, but not imminent in the way some headlines might suggest. Sixth, Arsenal are still looking to strengthen the right side of defence. Christian Mosquera is regarded as one of the standout signings in the Premier League last season after exceeding expectations. However, his less consistent pre-season has highlighted the need for additional depth on the right side of Arsenal's defence. I find this one genuinely interesting because it shows how quickly perception can shift. A player praised as a standout success barely months ago is now part of a conversation about needing more depth around him. That is not necessarily a criticism of Mosquera himself. Pre-season form fluctuates for everyone, but it does show Arsenal are not willing to rely on a single breakout campaign as proof that the position is fully solved. Depth, not panic, appears to be the driving motivation here. Seventh, Julian Alvarez is ready to clash with Atletico Madrid as he pushes to join Barcelona. Alvarez wanted to meet Diego Simeone to ask him to help facilitate his exit, but Simeone was absent, having travelled to Ibiza for 2 days off. The Argentine was reportedly furious and warned Atletico, quote, "Do not count on me." Alvarez also claims Atletico made him a promise back in February that he would be allowed to leave the club this summer. This is the most dramatic story in the entire roundup, and it is worth explaining exactly why it matters so much. A player publicly warning his own club not to count on him is about as clear a signal of unhappiness as you will see in professional football. The fact he could not even get a meeting with his manager because that manager was on a short break only adds to the sense of a relationship that has cooled significantly. Alvarez's claim about a February promise adds another layer. If true, it suggests this situation has been building quietly for months rather than emerging suddenly this summer. For Arsenal specifically, none of this guarantees anything. Alvarez's stated preference remains Barcelona, but a player this determined to leave and this frustrated with his current club is exactly the kind of situation that can eventually break in an unexpected direction if the preferred move does not materialise. Eighth, Martin Zubimendi is not currently on Jose Mourinho's transfer wish list at Real Madrid. The Portuguese manager had been seeking a Rodri-type midfielder, but is ready to rely on the options already available to him. Although Zubimendi has been linked with Madrid, Mourinho has not instructed the club to pursue the Arsenal midfielder. This is a reassuring update for anyone worried about losing one of Arsenal's returning World Cup players. Being linked with a move is very different from being actively pursued, and this update draws a clear line between the two. Mourinho choosing to work with his current midfield options rather than push for a new arrival suggests Zubimendi's position at Arsenal is safer right now than some of the surrounding noise might have implied. Ninth, Arsenal and West Ham are in talks about a possible deal for Reiss Nelson, with discussions between the two clubs ongoing over the structure of a deal. Nelson must decide whether he is willing to drop down to the Championship. The key detail here is not the talks themselves, it is the fact that Nelson would be dropping into the Championship rather than moving to another Premier League club. That is a significant career decision for any player, and it explains why this is described as an ongoing discussion rather than a done deal. Whether Nelson accepts likely depends on assurances around playing time and project ambition at his next destination, factors that clearly still need to be worked through before anything is finalised. 10th, there has been criticism directed at Viktor Gyokeres following the Emirates Cup defeat to Borussia Dortmund. Former refereeing chief Keith Hackett has urged Mikel Arteta to speak to his striker after Gyokeres appeared to go down easily under pressure from a Dortmund defender while attempting to win a penalty, with the referee waving play on. Hackett said that referees notice this kind of incident, that it can shape how officials view a player going forward, and warned that a reputation as a player who goes down easily can follow a striker into future matches, even when a genuine foul occurs. This is less about a single match and more about long-term reputation management. Hackett's point is a well-understood one in football. Referees are human, and if a player is perceived as someone who exaggerates contact, it can genuinely cost them decisions later, including in matches where they have been legitimately fouled. Whether Arteta acts on this specific piece of external advice is not something we know, but the underlying warning is a fair one. Reputation with officials builds over time, and one high-profile incident can start shaping perception in ways that hurt a striker across an entire season. 11th, and finally among the shorter updates, Marley Salamon will not go out on loan this summer. He will remain around the Arsenal first team and is expected to get chances this season. This is a clear vote of confidence from the coaching staff. Keeping a young player around the senior group rather than sending him out for regular minutes elsewhere signals that Arsenal see him as close enough to first-team involvement that development away from the club is no longer considered the priority. It is a small update on its own, but it fits into the broader picture of Arsenal trusting more of their academy talent to contribute directly this season. Now let us step back and look at the wider situation, because three bigger threads tie all of this together, and each one deserves its own proper breakdown. The first is the full scope of what Arsenal still need to accomplish before deadline day arrives. So far this summer, business has been relatively restrained. Illan Meslier arrived from Leeds United on a free transfer, Christos Tsolis joined from Club Brugge, and Bruno Guimaraes completed a move from Newcastle United. Piero Hincapié also became a permanent addition after an option to buy clause in his loan agreement with Bayer Leverkusen was activated. Mikel Arteta has spoken publicly about wanting to further strengthen the squad, saying the club is very much looking forward to adding the right player if one becomes available in the market. The scale of what is still needed becomes clear once you consider what was lost earlier in the window. Arsenal were unable to complete a move for Vinicius Jr., who would have transformed the attacking line almost overnight. To compensate for that miss, the situation increasingly points toward needing both a genuine top-level striker and a winger with proven Premier League quality. Julian Alvarez stands out as the most sensible upgrade on Viktor Gyokeres given the alternatives, particularly with Ivica Kvaratskhelia effectively untouchable at Paris Saint-Germain, and Luis Diaz unlikely to leave Bayern Munich after only a single season there. On the wing, with Rafael Leao previously struggling against English opposition and Marcus Rashford's situation at Manchester United still unresolved, Pedro Neto stands out as the most realistically attainable option, given Chelsea's willingness to consider a sale. Beyond the attacking additions, a further defensive body, with Ezri Konsa mentioned as a fit, would provide Arteta with valuable depth across central defence and right back. On the outgoing side, the picture is just as important. Gabriel Jesus and Gabriel Martinelli have both entered the final 12 months of their contracts, meaning they are currently on track to leave for free next summer unless resolved, although Arsenal do hold an option to extend Martinelli's deal by a further year. Recouping a fee for either player, particularly Jesus given the ongoing background interest from Italy, would represent smart business rather than losing them for nothing later. Ethan Nwaneri, only 19 years old, is expected to be loaned out, a sensible step to ensure he gets the regular first-team minutes he needs to keep developing, minutes that are unlikely to be guaranteed at Arsenal itself right now. Alongside him, Reiss Nelson, Kepa Arrizabalaga, Fabio Vieira, Gabriel Jesus and Gabriel Martinelli are all expected to depart in some form before the window shuts. Put together, this paints a picture of a squad still very much under construction. If Arsenal can land a striker of Alvarez's quality, secure a proven winger in Neto, add defensive depth through someone like Konsa, and successfully move on the players no longer part of the long-term picture, the squad shapes up to look genuinely title and Champions League ready. If those pieces do not fall into place before the deadline, the gap left by missing out on Vinicius Jr. risks becoming a real weakness rather than a one-time disappointment. The second major thread is the ongoing Julian Alvarez situation at Atletico Madrid, and it is worth laying out in full because there is real substance behind it. Alvarez reported back to Atletico Madrid for pre-season testing following his involvement with Argentina at the World Cup, where he finished as runner-up. His return has brought fresh scrutiny to his future, and there is expected to be clarity soon on whether he actually stays at the club this summer, despite Atletico currently suggesting that he will. Behind the scenes, Alvarez has been pushing for a move to Barcelona, though Barcelona have reportedly been threatened with legal action after unsettling the player through their pursuit. Spanish media reports indicate Alvarez wants to sit down directly with Diego Simeone to explain how he feels now that the intensity of the transfer talk has settled following the World Cup. Earlier speculation around his future became intense enough that Alvarez chose to put it aside and focus fully on the tournament with Argentina. But his intention to leave Atletico Madrid has not gone away. Adding further weight to the situation, his relationship with Simeone reportedly deteriorated toward the end of last season, after Alvarez played through significant pain following an ankle injury. Simeone was expected to be back at the club on the Wednesday following his short break, with his coaching staff and players resting after a friendly against Manchester City in Seoul. This is where Arsenal's interest becomes relevant again. Their admiration for Alvarez dates back to his time at Manchester City, and after 2 seasons with Atletico Madrid, there is a growing sense of frustration on his side that the club is not currently competing for the biggest prizes, reinforced by their defeat to Real Sociedad in the Copa del Rey final. Alvarez wants Atletico's ambition to match his own, and Arsenal would reportedly be prepared to spend significantly to bring him in, though his stated preference remains a move to Barcelona. There is an important conditional scenario worth flagging clearly to keep expectations realistic. If Atletico Madrid decide they will only facilitate his departure to a club outside of Spain, that specific circumstance is what would open the door for Arsenal. Right now, Atletico hold the stronger negotiating position, but Arsenal missing out on Vinicius Jr. may actually work in their favour here, since it leaves them with funds available and a clear need to improve their attacking options. Simeone himself, speaking ahead of the Manchester City friendly, addressed the situation directly, saying the club made a decision that has been well explained, that from a sporting perspective, they are very happy to have a player like Alvarez, and that they will continue to help him grow while he keeps contributing at the level he has shown in recent years. My honest analysis of this entire saga is that it remains genuinely fluid. Alvarez wanting Barcelona is not the same as Barcelona being able or willing to complete that move given the legal complications already in play. Arsenal are realistically a contingency option rather than his first choice destination, but contingency options in football transfers have a habit of becoming reality when a preferred move stalls. The planned conversation with Simeone, once it happens, should provide much clearer direction on where this situation is actually heading. The third and final thread is the return of Arsenal's World Cup contingent to full training and why that timing matters heading into the new season. The last group of Arsenal's World Cup players were originally due back at the Soba Realty Training Centre on the Monday, but 2 of them chose to return early instead. Following the Emirates Cup match against Borussia Dortmund, Mikel Arteta confirmed that Bukayo Saka and World Cup champion David Raya were eager enough to get started that they gave up their final days of rest and returned a day early on the Saturday. Arteta described this as a genuinely positive sign, confirming that by the following day, the entire squad would be available to begin the full training programme together. Raya had actually already featured in the warm-up before the Dortmund defeat, keen to build momentum after spending the summer largely on the bench for Spain during their World Cup campaign. Saka, for his part, will be eager to move past a difficult individual season and a World Cup campaign that was affected by ongoing Achilles discomfort. England managed the issue carefully throughout the tournament in North America, which limited his ability to start matches consistently, even though he still produced a hat-trick against France in the third-place playoff in Miami. Alongside Saka and Raya, Martin Zubimendi, Mikel Merino, Noni Madueke, Eberechi Eze and Declan Rice have all now also returned to the group. William Saliba and Jurrien Timber remain the notable absentees, still sidelined outside this returning group, though beyond those 2, Arsenal are now considered to be virtually back at full strength. This comes alongside the earlier additions of Bruno Guimaraes, Christos Zolis and Ilan Meslier, with Guimaraes training alongside his new teammates in a lighter session after being formally presented to supporters before kick-off against Dortmund. Arteta also addressed how he intends to manage this carefully during the opening months of the campaign, pointing to the approach already used against Dortmund, where Martin Odegaard was substituted after just 30 minutes as part of a heavily rotated lineup, mirroring a similar approach used in the earlier friendly against Real Betis. He described this as a deliberately specific preparation process, acknowledging that results may not immediately reflect it, but expressing confidence that the benefits will become clear once the team begins competing for major trophies in the weeks ahead. What this tells me, pulling all three threads together, is that Arsenal are approaching this final stretch of the window from a position of relative squad health, but genuine incompleteness in key areas. The players are largely back, fit and eager, which is exactly the platform a club wants heading into deadline day. But platform alone does not win titles. The Yildiz door has closed. The Alvarez door remains only partially open. The Neto conversation looks the most advanced and the most realistic. And several players who no longer fit the long-term picture still need to be moved on before the market shuts. Every one of these threads points toward the same conclusion. The next few weeks matter enormously for how this Arsenal season eventually unfolds. Whether Arteta gets the finishing touches he clearly wants, the top-level striker, the proven winger, the extra defensive depth, will likely go a long way toward determining whether this genuinely becomes a season of sustained trophy contention, or another campaign where the margins simply were not closed in time. That is where things stand right now. Keep this channel close over the coming days, because with the deadline approaching fast, these situations can shift quickly, and when they do, you will get the clear, accurate breakdown here first. If this analysis helped you understand the full picture, make sure you are subscribed, and I will see you in the next one.